We spend a massive amount of time on the show dissecting innovation. We look at the next big leap in tech or new business models, renewable energy. But today, I want to start somewhere completely different. I want to start with a feeling.
A feeling.
Yeah, it's a specific, call it a creeping sensation that I think a lot of us have felt, even if you listening haven't quite put a name to it yet.
I think I know exactly where you're going with this.
Picture this, right? You walk into a five-star hotel lobby, or maybe you're in a high-end airport lounge in Doha, Singapore.
Right.
Or, if you're really lucky, you're stepping onto the aft deck of a 50-meter super yacht.
Right.
You look around, and objectively, it is flawless. The marble floors are polished to a mirror finish, the brass accents are gleaming, the lighting has that perfect warm sculptural glow. It smells expensive, it looks expensive, it is technically perfect, and yet you feel absolutely nothing.
It's the silence, isn't it? And I don't mean acoustic silence. I mean an emotional silence.
Exactly. It's this weird realization that you could be anywhere. You could be in Shanghai, New York, London, or on a boat in the Mediterranean, and the room would look exactly the same. It's beautiful, sure, but it's interchangeable, it's generic, and honestly, it's kind of boring.
What you're describing is the central crisis facing the global ultra-luxury landscape right now. It is what the source material we are diving into today, a highly structural document titled MSF v3.0a. It calls this the crisis of sameness.
The crisis of sameness.
Yes, and they are very clear right from the start. This is not just some aesthetic annoyance. It is a structural collapse. We have reached a point where differentiation has effectively evaporated.
That is a huge statement. A structural collapse. I mean, it sounds like we're talking about a bridge falling down, not interior design.
Well, in a way we are, because for the last 30 years, the luxury industry has relied entirely on design and engineering to compete. The logic was always, my marble is rarer than yours, or my ship is quieter than yours.
Right, the technical specs.
Exactly. But the truth is, everyone is caught up. Every major operator can deliver exceptional design now. Every shipyard can deliver flawless engineering. Technical execution is no longer a competitive advantage. It is just the baseline expectation.
So if everyone has the exact same level of perfection, perfection just becomes invisible.
Precisely. You are left with what MSF v3.0 calls visual uniformity. We see the same marble, the same minimalism, the same curated coffee table books about Bauhaus design. Now, these things communicate status, sure. They say money was spent here, but they do not communicate identity.
And that's where that creeping feeling comes from.
Yes, that leads directly to the emotional vacuum. Spaces are engineered to absolute perfection, yet they remain emotionally silent. You, the guest, move between them without any shift in meaning.
And that is the hook for today's deep dive. We are exploring this MSF v3.0 framework, which claims to be a cultural operating system. The premise here is that we need to stop decorating spaces and start programming them with meaning. The goal is to transform a space from a functional environment, a place you just physically exist in, into a world.
A world with its own logic, its own gravity, and its own soul. And I want to set the tone immediately for everyone listening. This is not a discussion about which throw pillows to buy. The voice of this text is sovereign, precise, and structural. It argues that we are moving from an era of design to an era of cultural intelligence.
So let's unpack this crisis of sameness from an economic perspective, because I can hear the skeptics or maybe the CFOs listening right now saying, who cares if it looks the same, if it's luxurious, people will pay. But the source material argues there is a severe financial risk here.
There is a massive financial risk. This brings us to the first major section of the document, the collapse of luxury and the necessity of culture. The risk is commoditization. If a hotel in Tokyo looks exactly like a hotel in Miami, why should you pay a premium for one over the other?
Right.
When environments lose their symbolic coherence, when they lose their narrative depth, they become commodities.
Yeah, if I can get the exact same marble bathroom anywhere, the only thing left to compete on is price, or maybe location, but the brand itself loses all its power.
Exactly. The source calls this the symbolic collapse.
Yep.
Meaning has been replaced by styling, identities are replaced by branding, and that is a very dangerous place for a luxury asset to be. You see, the market responds to this emptiness by shouting louder. More marketing, more ad campaigns, more noise, but the underlying product is still hollow.
It's like putting a new, shiny label on an empty bottle.
And that brings us to the core solution proposed here. Culture as infrastructure. This is a critical distinction to grasp. Most people think of culture, art, history, narrative, as decoration. It's the stuff you add at the very end of the project.
You build the building, you pick the furniture, and then you say, okay, let's hang some art on the walls to make it look nice.
Right. That's the cherry on top approach.
Mhm.
And MSFE 3.0 argues that this is the root of the failure. Decoration is additive, it's surface level, you can take the art down, and the room is still the exact same room.
It doesn't change the structure.
Exactly. Culture, however, must be generative. It must be the infrastructure itself. It has to be integrated before the materials are chosen, before the layout is even drawn. It is the DNA from which the entire environment emerges.
So instead of building a box and then trying to give it a personality, you start with the personality, the culture, and let that dictate the actual shape of the box.
Precisely. And when you do that, you create an asset that fundamentally holds its value. The text makes a fascinating point about asset value here. If your design is based on trends, say the current obsession with mid-century modernité, then as soon as that trend dies, your asset is outdated. You have to renovate.
Which costs millions.
Exactly. But if your space is built on a deep structural cultural logic, it doesn't age. It endures. It compounds value over time because it isn't trying to be cool. It's trying to be true.
That is a massive shift in thinking. For developers who are just used to refreshing the soft goods every 5 years, it's saying that culture is actually a hard form of capital.
It is the ultimate capital in luxury.
Okay, let's get into the mechanics of this. How do we actually do it? Because it sounds great in theory, but the source material introduces a concept here called art as generative DNA. And this part really blew my mind because it completely flips the script on how design usually happens.
It really does. This is the methodology phase. We touched on this slightly, but traditionally, art enters way too late. It's just an accessory. But the Uran reversal, that's the specific term used in the text, proposes that art should be the first intelligence.
The first intelligence, meaning before the architect even draws a single line.
Before the architect draws a line, before the interior designer picks a fabric swatch, the artwork, or rather the internal logic of the artwork, dictates the spatial logic.
Okay, can we make this concrete? Because it sounds very abstract. How does a painting actually tell you how to build a wall?
Let's break it down using the tool the source provides, which is called operational translation. It's not about copying the painting literally. You don't just paint the walls the exact same color as the canvas. You look at the systems within the art. Take rhythm, for example.
Okay.
If you have a generative art piece that is frantic, staccato, high energy, that dictates a circulation pattern, maybe the hallways are narrower, the turns are sharper, the movement through the space is quick and energetic.
Interesting. And if the art is slow, sweeping, expansive?
Then the architecture must follow suit. Long sight lines, soft rolling transitions, a circulation pattern that encourages you to drift rather than march from point A to point B. You are literally translating the physics of the art into the physics of human movement.
That makes so much sense. It creates a feeling that matches the art without just pasting a mural on the wall. What about color? The text mentions a chromatic universe.
Right, a chromatic universe. It's not just a color palette, it's an entire universe of temperature. The temperature of the art defines the material palette. If the art is cool, metallic, and sharp, you aren't going to use warm, fuzzy woods and plush velvets in the room. You might use polished stone, glass, steel. You are translating the temperature of the artwork into the temperature of the room.
And geometric tension, that was the third one.
Geometric tension defines your thresholds and spatial release. Does the art feel compressed? Then maybe the entryway to the room is low and tight, compressing you physically before you step into a larger room. The space becomes an authored world. It eliminates randomness.
That's the key right there, isn't it? Eliminating randomness. Because when I walk into those generic luxury hotels, it feels like a committee chose everything. Like, oh, gray's in right now, let's do gray. People seem to like brass, let's add some brass fixtures. It's a collection of nice things, but they don't belong together structurally.
Exactly. When you use art as the generative DNA, nothing is arbitrary. Why is that wall curved? Because the generative logic dictated it. Why is the light so specific to that one corner? Because the chromatic universe demanded it. It creates a profound sense of inevitability. The space feels like it could not exist in any other form. And that is what we mean by an authored world.
This moves us seamlessly into the next part, emotional and narrative architecture. We're moving from the visual to the visceral here.
Yes, emotional architecture sounds poetic, but in MSF v3.0, it is treated as a highly rigorous discipline. It is the intentional design of atmosphere, rhythm, temperature, and presence.
Let's talk about emotional temperature, because I assume we aren't talking about the actual thermostat setting in the hallway.
No, we are not. Emotional temperature is the interplay of light, acoustics, and density. It creates a quality of warmth or coolness, intimacy or openness. Think about a grand cathedral versus a dark underground nightclub. That is a massive difference in emotional temperature. But in luxury spaces, it's often muddy. The lighting says intimate, but the acoustics say cafeteria.
Oh, I hate that. When you're in a beautiful, dim restaurant, but it's so loud you have to shout across the table, it completely breaks the spell.
That is a failure of emotional architecture. It's an incoherence. The goal of MSF v 3.0 is to design for resonance and presence, to engineer moments that literally stop time. When you walk into a space and your shoulders physically drop and your breathing slows down and you suddenly feel here, you're present, that is not an accident. That is structural engineering.
And what about emotional rhythm?
This is crucial for keeping a guest engaged. If every single room in a hotel screams at you with the exact same intensity, look at me, look at this chandelier, look at this art, it's exhausting. You need compression and expansion. You need a quiet, dark corridor before you enter the grand, bright ballroom. That contrast, that rhythm, is what keeps the guest present. It prevents monotony.
It's just like music.
Yeah.
You can't just have the chorus playing on a loop for an hour straight. You need the verse, you need the bridge, the quiet moments to make the loud moments hit harder.
Precisely. And this leads directly into narrative architecture. This isn't about putting a little brass plaque on the wall explaining the history of the building. It's about space as sequence, moving beyond static rooms to an authored journey.
The outline mentions thresholds here, not just as doorways, but as shifts in atmospheric state.
A threshold is the most powerful narrative tool an architect has. It is where the change happens. Most designers treat corridors as waste space, just a functional way to get from A to B. But in narrative architecture, the corridor is a palate cleanser. It's a transition. It prepares you for the next scene in the narrative. If you don't manage the threshold, you break the narrative completely.
And this connects deeply to loyalty, doesn't it? Because if I go to a place that takes me on this intentional journey where I feel the rhythm, I feel the temperature shift, I feel held by the space, I'm going to want to go back. Not because the bed was soft, but because the world felt right.
Correct. You return to a world you feel part of, not just a facility you used. That is the fundamental difference between a transaction and a bond.
I want to pivot now to symbolic identity architecture,
Yeah.
because we've talked a lot about feeling and art, but symbols are incredibly powerful. The text actually calls them strategic assets.
Symbols are the silent language of the environment. We rely so much on explicit logos and signage in the modern world. But the most powerful environments communicate without a single sign.
Give me an example of that. How does a building speak without a sign?
Think about a traditional religious space or a Supreme Court of law. You know exactly how to behave the second you walk in. You know exactly what the hierarchy is. You know what is valuable and what isn't. And there are no signs telling you to be respectful. The architecture, the sheer height of the ceilings, the quality of the light, the material weight of the doors, it all structurally communicates authority or sanctity.
Wow. And in luxury.
In luxury, we unfortunately see a lot of symbolic incoherence. A brand claims to be all about timeless elegance, but the space is filled with trendy, plastic-feeling furniture. Or a brand claims to be a sanctuary, but the layout is cluttered, chaotic, and noisy. This erodes trust instantly. It's a lie told in space.
A lie told in space. That is profound. So symbolic coherence is when the brand's promise and the physical reality are perfectly aligned.
Yes. The goal is for the environment to feel inevitable, as if the brand physically manifested itself from the ground up. When you have that coherence, you build unquestionable authority. You don't need to tell people you are prestigious. They feel it in their bones.
This all sounds incredible, but I can hear the developers and the investors listening to this asking, okay, but where is the value? Show me the ROI on a cultural operating system. And the text explicitly dedicates a section to this, the value architecture.
This is where MSF v3.0 redefines the concept of capital. We're not just talking about financial capital in the traditional sense. We're talking about the specific forms of value generated by this system that eventually convert to financial capital.
Let's run through them. There are 5 main types listed. First is cultural capital.
This is the primary source of differentiation. It is the coolness factor, the cultural relevance, the intellectual weight of the place. It's what makes a place a true destination, not just a location on a map.
Next is experiential capital.
That is what the guest actually remembers. It is the sensory value, the memory of how the light hit the stone, the sound of the room, the feeling of the threshold. That is what generates genuine word of mouth.
Then we have symbolic capital.
The prestige of meaning. It's the status you get not just from spending a lot of money, but from understanding the code, being part of the in-group that gets what the space is doing.
Fourth is creative capital, and fifth is network capital. Let's group those.
Creative capital is the ecosystem of artists, designers, and makers you employ to build the world. They provide the depth. You aren't just buying furniture or wholesale, you are commissioning culture. And network capital is connecting your asset to the broader cultural world, integrating with museums, galleries, other collectors. It roots the property in a wider cultural reality.
And all of these combine to create what the text calls emotional gravity.
That is the cumulative effect of the entire system. Emotional gravity is the pull. It's why some places are always empty despite being objectively beautiful, and others are utterly magnetic. The magnetic ones have high emotional gravity. They anchor the guest.
So we have the philosophy, we have the value proposition. Now let's get into the nuts and bolts, the systems. Because one of the biggest fears operators have is operational chaos. If we make everything unique and artistic and deep, how do the housekeeping staff know what to do? How do we run this at scale?
Yeah, it is a very valid concern, and MSF v3.0 addresses this head-on. It starts with the art-driven spatial method, which is the backbone we already discussed, but then it introduces the personalization engine.
Right, which deals with the inherent tension between wanting to personalize everything and the operational chaos that usually brings.
Exactly. We all want personalization and luxury, but if every guest asks for something completely different, the entire operation collapses under its own weight. The solution proposed here is modular, reversible, pre-curated interventions.
So it's not a free-for-all where the guest just demands whatever they want.
No, not at all. Think of it like a highly sophisticated menu of pre-approved, culturally aligned options. The guest feels like they are curating their own bespoke world, but for the staff on the ground, it is a simple selection of option A, option B, or option C, all of which have been rigorously vetted for operational safety. It creates maximum emotional relevance for the guest, but maintains total operational sanity for the hotel or the yacht.
That is really smart. And then there's the cultural monetization engine. This one is fascinating because the text explicitly states, retail and gift shops dilute luxury.
They absolutely do. Nothing breaks the immersive spell of a crafted world faster than seeing a rack of branded t-shirts or keychains in the lobby. It screams commercial transaction. It instantly pulls you out of the narrative.
It's what's the alternative? Because these properties still need to drive revenue.
The mantra is, not retail, resonance. The idea is to seamlessly integrate revenue into the environment itself. Limited editions, curated objects that are actually in the room and part of the design. You don't go to a register to buy a souvenir. You acquire a piece of the world you just inhabited. It's much more subtle, much more high-end, and ultimately much more lucrative because you are selling meaning, not merchandise.
That makes a lot of sense. And finally, in this section, the bridges system.
This is pure governance. In any major project, you have architects, operators, brand managers, artists, and they usually speak completely different languages. The bridges system ensures coherence across all these fragmented teams. It's the translation layer that makes sure the architect's spatial vision actually works for the operator's daily reality, and that the artist's conceptual logic aligns with the brand's core identity.
Moving on to what I think is one of the most visionary parts of this entire document, constellation logic and cross-sector intelligence.
This is where we zoom out. Way, way out.
Because right now, the luxury industry is incredibly siloed. Hotels only talk to hotels. Yacht builders only look at other yachts. Aviation looks at aviation. But the client, the guest, they live in all of them fluidly.
Exactly. The reality of the guest is fluid. They wake up in a luxury hotel, they take a private car to a marina, they get on a tender, board a super yacht, and maybe fly private to a residence later that week. To the guest, this is one continuous, unbroken life. But the industries providing these services treat them as completely isolated events.
It's jarring. You leave a flawlessly designed, serene hotel and get into a car that feels stiff and corporate, then arrive at a marina that feels purely industrial. The world constantly breaks.
The flaw is vertical isolation. Industries are digging deeper into their own narrow niches. The fix, according to Uran and MSF v3.0, is what they call constellations, designing a network of worlds that share a foundational cultural logic.
So if I'm a major brand, I shouldn't just be designing a nice hotel. I should be designing the emotional connection between the hotel, the car, the yacht, the lounge.
You should be designing the universe. The guest should remain in the exact same emotional coherence, even as the physical environment changes. The scale of the space changes, the function changes, but the structural logic, the DNA, remains completely intact.
This brings up cross-sector intelligence, the difference between horizontal and vertical expertise.
Most experts in the world are vertical. I am a hotel expert, or I am a yacht expert. They know everything about their specific silo, but nothing about the others. Uran proposes a horizontal approach, seeing patterns that cross across sectors.
Give me a tangible example of that. What's a pattern that crosses from, say, a yacht to a hotel?
Think about the concept of privacy and service flow on a 50-meter superyacht. It is incredibly sophisticated. The crew are essentially invisible until the exact moment they are needed, and then they vanish again. Hotels often struggle massively with this. Service is either overly intrusive or it's totally absent. By applying yacht-level service logic to a hotel suite, you innovate.
Oh, I see.
Or take the narrative rhythm of a private luxury residence, which is highly personal, very slow, very intimate, and apply that exact rhythm to an aviation lounge, which is usually frantic, stressful, and impersonal.
That's fascinating. You're cross-pollinating the best structural practices from completely different worlds.
And the source code for all of this, the ultimate horizontal layer, is what they call CCIs, cultural and creative industries. The document argues that these shouldn't be the afterthought. They are the first industry. They provide the source code and the logic that should govern all of the other functional industries.
I want to address the skeptics again. We talked about operations earlier, but operational feasibility comes up again as a major focus. Because when you talk to an operator about letting culture and art dictate the architecture, they get very nervous. They think it sounds fragile, it's going to be impossible to clean, or dangerous to the daily operation.
Reversibility and safety. That is the absolute mantra here.
Explain the principle of reversibility. Because it sounds like a paradox to build something structurally deep, but also reversible.
It addresses the exact fear you just mentioned, that culture disrupts operations. The principle states that cultural interventions must be modular. If a specific art installation or the narrative element isn't resonating or simply needs to evolve over time, it can be cleanly removed or changed without tearing down the physical walls of the building. It allows for rapid evolution without structural destruction.
So you aren't stuck with it forever if the world changes.
No. And regarding reducing friction, there is a really counterintuitive truth embedded here. Operators think deep culture makes things complicated, but a crystal clear cultural identity actually simplifies decision-making for the staff.
How so? Walk me through that.
If the world is clear, if the staff structurally understands we are a sanctuary of quiet reflection, then they instinctively know exactly how to greet a guest. They know not to shout across the lobby. They know the exact pacing to use when placing a cup on a table. When the identity is fuzzy or generic, staff have to guess, or they have to follow a rigid corporate script that feels robotic.
Which is the worst feeling.
Exactly. Culture provides the intuition. Service becomes entirely natural because the context is crystal clear.
That's a great point. Clarity empowers the team on the floor. Okay, we're bringing it home. The final major section, value creation and the edge.
This is the ultimate summary of why a developer or an operator must adopt this system.
First up is identity creation.
Identity is not a logo.
Yeah.
It is not a color scheme. It is the feeling of absolute singularity. It is the definitive answer to the question, why does this place exist?
And financial uplift. We touched on this, but let's hit the key metrics.
Higher ADR, average daily rate. Higher occupancy, and critically, a vastly higher overall asset value. Because if your space cannot be replicated by the competitor down the street, you effectively have a monopoly on that specific emotional experience.
Brand of protection.
A world cannot be copied. You can easily copy a chair. You can copy a floor plan. You can even steal a Michelin-starred menu. But you cannot copy a complex, culturally rooted ecosystem of meaning. Only products can be copied. Worlds are entirely unique.
And that leads to the ultimate competitive advantage discussed in the tech standing outside competition.
This is the pinnacle goal.
Yeah.
MSF v3.0 suggests that you must stop competing on amenities. Everyone has a luxury spa now. Everyone has a celebrity chef. Those are commodities. You don't compete on amenities. You compete on inevitability.
Inevitability.
The profound sense that this place is a force of nature. It transforms luxury from a category which is just something you buy into a cultural force, which is something you join. When you achieve that level of emotional gravity, you aren't competing with the hotel down the street anymore. You are playing a completely different game.
It's a remarkably powerful vision. And as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to look at the outro of this document. It describes this precise moment we are in right now as a threshold.
Yes, the old model of luxury, the endless marble, the shiny brass, the visual uniformity, it's collapsing. It's actively losing its value as we speak. But the text insists this is not a tragedy for the industry. It is an opening.
An opening for a new operating system.
Exactly. It is the chance to stop assembling spaces, just picking premium parts from a catalog, and start authoring worlds.
True luxury is no longer about being impressive. I think we've all been impressed enough by big chandeliers. It's about being resonant.
It is about creating worlds that endure in memory, worlds that actually mean something to the people who inhabit them.
So for everyone listening, whether you're in hospitality, real estate development, or just someone who genuinely loves great spaces, consider how this scales to you. If luxury sets the operating system for how humans gather, how does this redefine the sovereignty of our own personal environments? Ask yourself, is the space you're building, or even just the home you're living in, just a collection of nice things? Or is it a world? Because authoring a space with intention, rather than just decorating it, might be the most powerful cultural statement you can make.
And ultimately, that is the only kind of luxury worth creating.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into MSF v3.0. It has been a truly mind-expanding conversation.
It certainly has.
We'll see you all next time.